What's up, everybody? We're back. Broken City Artist Podcast. We have a special guest. Mike, why don't you do the introductions?
Yeah, I was talking to Adam about my friend Ian Grom. Those of you involved in the marching arts know him well. I thought it'd be a cool thing, kind of a mixing of worlds, to dive into a little bit about Ian that we don't know.
Hopefully not too much.
He is a lizard alien.
I got some skeletons.
One of the things, I guess, kind of to start the whole thing rolling, I know a little bit about you before the drum corps scene, the indoor scene, but I think it would be interesting, your thoughts on what you did, the pathways that you chose early in life, and the skills that you developed and the experiences you had pre-drumline,
right,
pre-BC indoor. How have you utilized those? How have those contributed to your, I think anyone would recognize as massive success?
Thank you, sir.
In this industry, that there's something there that was developed before you've developed the skills that you have now, the very specific skills that you have now.
And let me jump in really quick and say, for those of you who are watching that come maybe from my world or whatever, if you're about to turn this off, don't.
History of a Band Geek. See ya.
Google
Ian Grom,
and look. You know, Pulse is one of the groups that you work for, right? And he's a Vic Firth artist. Yeah, Box.
We just came out with my new signature mallets with Vic Firth.
I just looked at those today.
Yeah. So stuff's going great, and Box 6 is jamming, lots of original composition, and lots of stuff out there. So.
Awesome, yeah. So if you want to pause, Google that, and then come back, and you'll be interested.
Yeah,
if you're not already. All right, cool. So,
or you'll definitely not be interested, and we'll never see you.
Yeah, and then we didn't waste your time. So to answer your question, so what was the?
I think probably what is when people ask me that, the most different thing about me of someone that's we consider successful in the activity is I didn't do it at all. I never marched drum corps.
Oh.
Yeah, I never did anything of any merit. I went to a little crappy music program in Fullerton at Sunny Hills High School, and before that I was at Fullerton High, and these were very early days when the percussion programs, we didn't have metronomes, I didn't know what a triplet roll was. These are things, I didn't have the skill sets that, I mean, like 10% of the kids now, I mean, I don't even have that knowledge. It's absolutely insane what I didn't have. And I think because of that, that's what drove me to go to school for music. I went to Cal State Long Beach for music performance, but it wasn't an option to like, well, I'm going to balance drum corps and indoor, and then, well, maybe I'll put off college. It was like, at that age, it was like, nope, you go to music school if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So were you in like garage bands?
Yeah. I think I
focused on drum set. You were a piano player first.
No,
right?
No. Drum set for sure.
Okay.
I like played crappy alto sax in 3rd grade. That lasted 6 months.
All right.
What a evil experience that was. And I played piano a little bit as a kid, but then never touched it again until really like by the time I was in high school. I didn't actually start playing drums until I was about 14, 15, like my sophomore year of high school. So I was like a late bloomer. It just happened to be that my cousin came over, visited us while I was like in 8th grade, and he started playing the drums. My cousin is now the associate principal percussionist with the St. Louis Orchestra. So he's
that's awesome.
Kansas City. He's going to kill me if he sees this. But yeah, he's an absolute monster in the orchestral percussion world. But he's my younger cousin, and I was like, oh, drums are cool. Whatever. He left. Never thought about it again, and one day I just asked my dad. We had moved back to California, and I was like, so I'm thinking about maybe playing the drum. And before I could get the word out, he's like, flew out into the garage, grabbed all the drums from the garage, and like was starting to set up the kit. He's like, yeah, sure, what do you want to play? I can show you some stuff.
No way.
He got me some boom boom bap bap ba doom bap. The Guitar Center special.
We call it the beat of the street.
Yeah, exactly.
It's even better on the synthetic drums. So all you hear is the sticker in the pad.
Exactly.
That's my favorite.
So that was like the initial thing, and if you fast forward through that, although I did marching band, it was certainly not something I was passionate about. I really loved playing drums and being in bands. So.
And what was an early influence? So we can get a sense of what your headspace was like. Were you
like
into
as
prog
a drummer,
rock, or were you into?
Oh, I love classic rock. I love
Classic
Mitch
rock.
Mitchell. I love Ginger Baker. Heavy into that stuff. And the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Chad Smith was like, that was it.
sweet.
That was the be-all, end-all.
Uplift Mofo Party Plan?
A little later, because Blood Sugar Sex Magic at that age was
Ah.
more big than like the more punky stuff that was earlier.
Yeah.
That took a while.
That's what got me into it.
Yeah.
And
So
then
like,
when
if
that
you're
album came out, I was moving away from it.
well,
I like
because
the
yeah,
early stuff.
and Mother's Milk, which came right
Yeah,
after
'cause
that, and
that wasn't even Chad Smith. That wasn't even
transition.
Chad
Is that
Smith.
92, 93?
Blood
91?
Sugar Sex Magic, yeah.
Yeah.
But then
Okay.
Uplift Mofo Party Plan was more the punkish stuff
Yeah.
with
Who was that drummer?
Jack Irons.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the stuff I was into. Was it old guitar?
And that was like, and you know, when Pearl Jam was coming out and all this stuff was super heavy, that was a big influence then. So this thing of like having marching band on the radar as a kid was like, what? I want to play Green Day tunes. I want to play Chaparoo, Chaparoo, Chapara. You know, all the Trey Cool fills and all that
Sing
crap.
in an English accent.
Yeah, but I'm not English. That's strange. And Modern Drummer and all that crap. You know, like the mid '90s was like the glory days of wanting to like read magazines and do all that. So that was my influence.
So we're probably very close in age.
Yeah, I'm 36. I just turned
so
36.
40.
Yeah.
Yep. So
I think without the internet and all that stuff, I think we all have a similar upbringing in that like you were really more immersed in the MTV culture and like the grandeur and spectacle and idea of being a rock star. There weren't as many other options. You just had that singular mindset of like, I'm gonna make it. I can do this.
yeah, there's a real veil over what the mechanics of the music industry was really about, but there was also more of like a mystique about touring. You couldn't just like get on the internet and have access to the world. You had to actually like
there was a
work your way
limit
up to
to
the
information and stimulus that kind of I think spurred more like even if it was false, you thought you could make it.
Mm-hmm.
And there were more gigs back then.
I think that's like the definition of blissful ignorance. I think because now you get online and it's easy to be discouraged.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many good drummers
Mm-hmm.
that if you're the kind of person that's a little bit like that maybe needs to feel like you're the best around or I don't know.
Yeah, and then a video of a 12-year-old kid in Ghana playing on tin cans, and you're like, I'm done. I can barely hold my sticks. I'm out.
Yeah, exactly.
It is disheartening, and it's like I do think it's one of those things that if you're one of those kids that thrives off that, I'm gonna copy them. But if you're an insecure kid, like I know a lot of my students are, if they don't have that encouragement of letting them know that, dude, you can get there. It's gonna take time. I can see it doing some of the opposite.
I think
so there's too much
having
information.
Having that toggle between being a fan, being able to experience and take in all that media, and use it as, oh, how cool is this? Oh, check this out, and it can kind of shape who you are without letting the ego be affected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the problems are
Don't
is in
get
both
discouraged.
extremes. You know, if all that information discourages you, or all that information makes you think, oh, now I know what to copy. In both cases, the uniqueness of the individual is sort of like lost a little bit.
Yeah.
You don't feel like, oh, I can just be me and have a certain approach.
They're kind of just a mirror of whatever they've seen through a screen.
Yeah.
It's very weird. And I would say, more to the point of what you originally asked and how it transitions into this, my biggest thing was I was that immersed in like how a kid would be immersed in YouTube when I walked onto the campus at Long Beach State and it was like, what? West African drumming, steel drum, music theory, everything.
Yeah.
So all these things, these endless avenues that kids have now, I was able to have in real life with real people, with real teachers for 6 years.
Would you say that the momentum of where you eventually end up, but that start, that catalyst was more based in honing your skills, like the I guess it doesn't have to be literal, but like going into the rehearsal space and just
Oh my God, yeah.
Well,
I had a transition.
Or was it more like you're out at the clubs every night playing gigs?
Oh God, no. I was an absolute hermit in the shed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all I could do. It was like, well, I don't have that much piano background. I don't have that much mallet skills. I can't really. Oh my God, I have to do it all right now. And so freshman year was like. It was like staring into a strobe light for a year straight and not knowing what to do and just shutting down. And sophomore year, I realized, oh, so if I'm not practicing 8 to 10 hours a day, I'm screwed. So that was the decision making of like, I'm so far behind, I'm either going to win or I'm going to lose. And right now I'm losing badly. So I just decided like, screw this. I'm putting everything in. I'm saying yes to every performing ensemble. I don't care if it's playing timpani for the 3rd brass ensemble or being the drummer for the 3rd jazz band. It was like, I will say yes to every gig and do everything under the sun and work myself.
I think that's
until
an interesting.
I got nothing left.
That's an interesting mix of not just self motivation and having being goal oriented, but also courage. Like just
or stupidity.
well,
they could be intertwined.
As you're speaking, I'm trying to put myself in that context,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so not the road that I chose, and I can honestly say that I would, even knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have done that, and it's so.
I would say the same. Knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have done it.
Well,
it was like that youthful stupidity and that almost like ignorant self-confidence. They're like, I can do this. I got this. I did not have that. But no one told me no, so I just fired a million miles an hour.
I think it's just maybe because I know more about you than just what you said here today, but it's an interesting mix of how personality with just goals that everybody has. Everyone has goals, but you have that perfect mix of personality which removes fear, and then you just throw yourself out there.
So what was the underlying drive? Like, did you look around you and was it a competitive spirit or like
there was a good
swim?
mix of like people that you knew that were in school. You're like, okay, they're probably not going to be professional percussionists, but there was this pocket of guys back in like the late 90s and early 2000s, especially like right when I got into Cal State Long Beach in 98. There's this handful of players that were like, what? I mean, I would watch these guys play congas or whatever they were playing, and they were great at everything. Monster drum set players, great grad students, all these dudes that were like, I don't know what you're doing, just teach me one thing. How do I do the Brazilian swing? How do I do this? How do I do that? How do you learn all of these songs? How do I play marimba? What the hell is going on?
Did you have a goal in mind, or was it just being great?
Just like massive sponge and full immersion in the most variety of things humanly possible. Because I knew it wasn't just about playing drum set. And it was like, I went there specifically to learn more about the world percussion stuff, learning all the Brazilian stuff, the West African drumming, steel drum, all that. And then the more I was in there, I like, sophomore, junior year, no goals. Just get through your classes, kick ass, and practice as much as you can. And then you start to like crystallize a vision, I think, towards the end.
You start to see the end coming and go, wait a minute. This
almost
isn't all
was
there
like
is.
sometimes when you're like writing a piece that you just know you're like kind of amassing like sounds or ideas, and like you know that like you have to just do this work, and eventually like, oh look, I made David. You know? Oops.
Did commerce ever come into play? Like, 'cause you're speaking, I can picture you as that fresh college kid. But at any point did you think, how am I going to make a living at this? And
I took out a crap load of student loans, and it racked up a crap load of credit card debt. Massive.
So is that when you were
100%.
like junior, senior? You're like,
Oh yeah.
what's the reality?
It took me 6 years to finish because of all the undergrad classes, and really I was taking like, I'd be taking 20 units in a semester and take 1 GE. Everything else was like performance ensembles and anything that I could do to play. So it took me forever. I was in my 6th year of college taking Math 101 because I just had to get the math class out of the way. So I was like the guy in the front of the class like, shut up guys, I have to pass this. I have to graduate. I had practiced for 8 hours today, my recital's tomorrow. Just shut the hell up. I was like the cranky old man.
guy?
Yeah. Get off my lawn, I don't care how many beers you drink. That was me.
Well, yeah, I guess it just fascinated by, obviously you had to have had the support of your family.
Of course, yeah.
And
but a lot of it was then they took out a loan and I took out a loan, and then by senior year, like double senior year, I was starting to gig with my teachers. So, and I was getting Sunday church gigs, and I was starting to like build my infrastructure as a gigging musician before I got out.
So you did see like there's some sort of end net result.
Yeah,
to
I
all
did
of
stop sucking eventually.
Well, just the like, where do you see yourself as you're in college and you're trying to be that sponge? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years? And like, did that ever come into mind? And
constant fear and panic, yeah. But I think it's as difficult as that is. It's the constant mini victories, the appreciation of your teachers or your peers, and you know that you're on the right path, and the encouragement that people are pushing you there. Versus like, maybe percussion's not for you, buddy. No one had to have that one. But I mean, I remember specifically Michael Spyro handing my ass to me after we were at a rehearsal, and I was just playing like a little too busy, and he's like, "Yo, Ian, come here, let's have a talk." And I never remember having 2 buttholes ever so wide. I mean, he gave me a brand new one. It created a black hole in the universe that was like had its own gravitational pull, and it changed my life. it like really got me on the straight and narrow of like not bullshitting my playing. And then
That's
I found
what you don't get really on YouTube in the same way. You might get bad comments, but
no.
I remember the same thing. Like I remember Melvin Davis, like a moment when I did a jazz gig and I had listened to the wrong guys for a minute or whatever it was, and I just like didn't groove because I was like a groove drummer, sort of like exploring jazz. And I just remember that day when I was just kind of playful the whole time, and he took me aside on the break and was like, man, I got you on this gig because of groove. You got a groove. Like, he just really, like
oh my
landed.
God.
And I just remember thinking, like, oh. And you getting your butt kicked by, like, a mentor-type figure is, like, so meaningful. And it wasn't over text. It's like, you really have to deal with the person in front of you, you know? Like,
and I think in the marching activity, people get their heads handed to them all the time. It's kind of like by nature. Someone's just looking over, but there's not, like... there's always like that weird unspoken professionalism that it's like, that guy's terrible, I'm just not going to hire him again. They're not going to go out of their way to rip you a new one just to do it and then go have fun on the gig.
Right.
There was another guy, Russ Miller. He didn't rip me a new one, but Russ Miller, you know, session player, I went to go have some lessons with Russ, and he just was like, okay, so here's the problem. Boom! And just like broke it down. Yeah. Like, here's why your time sucks, here's what you need to do, you need to do this, you need to do that. This was after I graduated from college and was like gigging professionally.
Wow.
And now I'm finally hearing really what was wrong, which deep down, I knew there was something a little dicey. I couldn't put my fingers on it, and everyone was like, man, you're such a great drummer, play all these gigs. But then I would never get like that great of takes done in the recording session. And Russ just like opened up the universe and opened up my eyes, and then I saw time and tempo and pocket, and it was like, then it closed back up. He's like, but you don't get it yet. You have to do this and this. And that was right when I decided I was going to give up on my playing career, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. After I saw that.
It was like you were
it was a
little bit late to the party or something?
It was kind of a tough time for me, man. This was right around 2006, 2007. Right when like my teaching career was starting to pick up, but my playing career was taking over. Like, so I'd be, hey man, I can't be at this competition, and John would be like, what do you mean? You have to be there. I was like, no, I got this gig, this guy's gonna be there taking out the band, you know.
Yeah.
And so I had to make a decision, and like I had done big gigs, and I was like, man, I've opened up for Aerosmith. I have many patches on my belt. I'm important, but none of it mattered when Russ like kind of neutered me in a very teacher-friendly way. Like,
it's interesting what you went through college
and no one
really
spotted it, or it was like I was advanced enough that they were like, good job. It was, there's a little contention I have for that situation, and like not really getting the info when I was doing that time, those 10 hours a day, how much bad habits were starting to get enforced, you know, and really being able to bury a click and doing all those things. That's not in a book. You can study Afro-Cuban rhythms for drum set, but you can't just go like, bury the met, go. Right. Tune your snare down fat so it doesn't sound like crap on the recording. What? No, nobody, I didn't know I was supposed to do that.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff you don't get, I think, or you're not as likely to get in a school setting as opposed to a mentor setting, where you're really one-on-one with somebody who can like really get inside the machinery of what you're doing and the art and the craft and separate the two and da-da-da. Whereas I think that whole like, learn this groove, okay, you got it.
And you get half an hour a week, maybe an hour a week of private lessons. The whole rest of your musical life for that week, you're relatively unsupervised to fail quite significantly if you put your energy in the wrong direction, you know? Yeah. The bad habits that can be formed tempo-wise or your interpretation of stuff when you don't have someone actively watching after you. Yeah. That's why I'm such an absolute overlord over my drum set players. I mean, I feel sorry for the poor kids, but after 1 year with me, all of my drum set kids just turn into like mental ninjas. Because I'm thinking like, God damn it. If I can do one thing in the world, I'm going to do everything for every one of these drum set players that no one did for me. I'm going to make them understand that every damn note counts. Every touch, every cymbal, every rim shot consistency, every kick drum that's a little out, I'm going to punch you in the kidney until it's right.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have that. And that's the one thing every drum set player needs if you want to just be like...
Have you tried shock therapy for them?
Just maybe blow darts to the neck.
I just thought about
it's a Vic Firth product.
Yeah.
What's the movie that the jazz?
Whiplash.
Yeah.
Whiplash.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
I'm practicing. I don't know if that's really how I would practice, but yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Hollywood.
Yeah, indeed.
So what was, I hear your story, and I see like a love for drum set,
Yeah.
and then this strange situation where you were almost like the veil was lifted and you saw yourself through Russ Miller's eyes, and then and then you raised your own bar to that same level, and that almost led to a discouragement. Am I hearing you right?
Well, it
Where
was
you kinda
basically
said-
like, hey, cool, you need to relearn everything you've ever known about drum set.
Did that make you kind of back away from it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I was like, dude, if I count college up to then, it's like, well, I'm like 8-9 years deep, like fully committed to this instrument, and now it's like every little movement I make and everything in my whole concept of time isn't quite right. And at the same time, my writing career was starting to take off, and then I really had to have like kind of a come to Jesus with myself to figure out, what do I really want out of life? Do I just want to be someone's hired gun? Because I really started to love even these like dorky little crappy high school programs that I started. I remember like Mike watching Edison High School in 2005 and be like, hey man, these guys are pretty good. Like, really? Mike Dixon talked to me? I was so happy. And this is like, I'm already out of college. I've done like TV shows and all this stuff, but I was totally fanboyed out that Mike had come up and mentioned something. And it was like first group I ever taught, first time I'd ever done indoor. But there was something there that was like a new discovery, a new way of doing music that I didn't understand what the hell was going on.
And it's protected from the evils of the music industry.
Correct.
So
The
you get to have a lot
corruption and
more
the money and
control,
everything.
You're building people up.
And if you fail at the writing, you can just fix it the next day. Not like, oh, you biffed that track, you're never going to work again.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, it's really more...
It was like a real-time
12 months to
composing
biff that
wheelhouse. Yeah.
But I really
True.
connect to it in a way because Mike was my percussion instructor when I was in high school, and then I went off and I have a career in the music industry, and now coming back and being a part of Broken City, not only is it like nostalgically awesome and an activity that I have love for, but the way that the arts are dealt with and the way that the bar that you set for both of you set for what's great and what's not isn't like what sells and what isn't. And I realize there's what wins and what doesn't. That still is there, and that kind of is parallel in a way to monetization and commerce and stuff. But it really is, though, you guys have a choice to go like, I'm going to look at this artistically, and I think that the overall impact of that will be reflected in the judges' scorecards. But like, it really matters what we do here and what the experience of the kids is, and like, there's a purity in that I think trumps it's better.
Right. Well, we're creating an experience. We're not just creating something that you press play and someone enjoys it and then they put it on their playlist and work out to it. It's like we're taking X amount of months of our lives and dedicating it to these 40 kids and whoever else is in their interconnected circle. And so we've got them for that 6 months, whether they stay, whether they leave, whatever. They're with us having like a visceral experience, the goods, the bads, the uglies. It's not just like, let's make something and see if we can make some money off of it. Almost
culture.
All of us are just vastly sacrificing our personal time to make it work, because the end for me, there's nothing more gratifying that I've ever done than when we get to the end of an indoor season that was like a show I was really proud of, and I'm sure you can relate. There's no tour I ever did, no gig I ever played, no check I ever got that was infinitely as rewarding as seeing our products like come to life with the kids.
It's because it's such on a large scale.
Yeah.
With the amount of time and the depth that it reaches into your personal life, even as a performer. Coming up with the fees and all the rehearsal time and the gas money and sitting on the freeway and traffic.
And the horrible things that can happen in your personal life while that's happening. I mean, these are real kids with real problems. These kids, like, they don't have parents. They have really tough lives because they're young adults, especially like the independent world kids. When you really find out the backstory of these kids that drive from Arizona or drive from Fresno to do this thing, that's like not like that's not just making a song. It's like we have to create a life experience with them for a year. And sometimes it's not always like your ideal vision, but seeing that many people committed to it. And for me, even that, because I'm at almost every rehearsal, like at Pulse, let's say, that has a lot more emotional investment for me than other projects I've worked on where I've been happy with the music, but I don't have as direct connection not only with the kids but the teaching process to know every little ins and out of why it's not working. It's just like, yeah, I mean, that was cool, but I wasn't on the road that much, so I'm glad it's okay.
Right.
Versus indoor ends and you're like, you know, get a little misty-eyed.
Yeah, and it's great. Those kids too are coming from a place of like, they're not doing something to get paid, they're paying to do something.
Right.
So it's like, wow, that's a big mental shift and like a huge responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Mike always talks. You're always talking about the responsibility that you feel.
Oh, the fear
to the kids. Yeah. Paralyzing
the
fear.
fear that
fear of God.
Yeah, it's that. I'm sure you experience this too. Maybe not as much. Ian tends to be more ahead of schedule than I am. But it's that. It's a good fear. It's that sense of responsibility and loyalty to the membership when you know you have a 9 a.m. rehearsal on Saturday and you have to deliver. You can't show up and not have the material or something planned to be productive with their time.
And then you're managing a creative process that doesn't know what time it is.
Well, I think that like some of the scariest parts for me are when we have to first tell the kids what the show is. That's like, it's like the Emperor's New Clothes. Like, am I naked or is this cool? Like, I'm not sure because I feel like I'm naked because no one's reacting yet.
Right.
So either the explanation or whenever we first play the music for the kids, we sit them all down, we explain the show, and it's that time where you kind of know if it's going to work or not because it's the first time you really have had to explain it out loud and you watch the reaction, and as it's happening, it's like, I kind of love that I still get nervous and a little sick to my stomach because it means you don't have it all figured out, and there's still like a human condition as a creative person that you're still terrified that you might suck.
Oh yeah.
And that you don't want to let people down. And the expectations are like ever so high every single time you have to do it again.
And tell me this, like, I know that there's a certain, I would call it maybe like a small level of denial, but when I play a track for a new person, like let's say I've been working on something for my solo record, which is the most isolated thing I do, and you know, I play it for my wife, or I play it for you, or a friend or something for the first time. Actually, this more applies to doing things in the commerce world, but when you play it, you instantly hear it through their ears, and then you know, all of a sudden you know everything about it. Like everything that sucks is like blatant. And you're like,
I've been working on this for 6 months. How did I not hear all this before?
And usually it's like, oh, I knew that, but I was like a 40. Like, God. The worst is when that happens, like in an A&R guy's office or something.
Oh wow!
And you're like, oh, this.
I hope his ears aren't as good as mine.
Yeah, and you hear it, and you sense body language, and like, I even experienced somebody like they get to the chorus, and then you see their hands slide over the mouse, like they want to check their email. Like little body language things start to happen. You can feel
I would have like a small meltdown. I think.
Yeah.
He's like, no, because see what I was doing here, see what I really want to happen, see because the plugin didn't quite work. I start getting like ultra nervous.
Those are funny things.
It's funny, but that, like everything you just described, is not to get too specific with the marching arts, is what I've been such an advocate of making sure that the adjudication recognizes that with how they present themselves on their commentary.
Yeah.
The level of
respect,
engagement, respect, excitement. That
a little bit of empathy.
It might be the 30-second show that you're watching that day, but for those kids that are out on the floor, out on the field.
Well, and even
and
now,
for the staff too.
The kids that are the staff,
it's
these people
the
that are
only
just
time,
like, they just aged out. They're like 23, like, I skipped college to do indoor, now I'm just starting school and I'm trying to write my first show. These could be the next great minds, but man, if you're not careful with the commentary, they can kind of get
whether it's the commentary is in a positive light or a negative light, if there's a level of respect and acknowledgement of what you just mentioned, how much time and effort was put into that, I think it kind of mitigates the highs and lows.
Yeah.
You know, there can be a mutual respect and people can disagree.
Well, there can be a sympathy with understanding, hey guys, this isn't working right now. I know it's just a work in progress, but there's always like a delivery system, I think, that People are more willing to take the criticism when they know it comes from a sympathetic, understanding background. Like, I can tell the performers are young, we still got to work on performance engagement, blah, blah, blah. There's all those buzzwords you can throw in that make the person that's listening to the tape feel like, okay, you get it. You see that these kids are not, like, well-vetted monsters.
I think it's almost similar to if you're in a gigging band and you're playing different city every night and you're just you're on the road for 4 months, that it might be city number 50 for you, but those people bought tickets to see you, and you have to give them the show of your life. You have to give them everything. That's it's like the implied contract that you have.
That's the mark of not only a professional but just an artist, that they go up and they put that much into it every single time. And
like the consistency of always being on all the time. You can never let up. I think that all kind of like encapsulates a similar thing of what we're talking about. Like, for me, what it was always about just trying to be the best I could possibly be. Not even just be good, not be the best player in the world, but like be the best player I could, or the best composer I could. I want to be the best at indoor that I possibly can. I want to be the best at composing for front ensembles. Whatever it was, I did have that like aggressive drive. I did have that kind of all the way since I've been a kid. I think I've been extremely competitive and wanting to be the best. And I think as I got to be more of an adult, I turned it more towards, okay, I need to be the best version of me. But younger, I literally wanted to be the best. When you have that impetuous, youthful drive. And I think you do need a little of that.
All those locks.
Yeah, the glorious Wendy's locks.
Young, green, and full of beans. So what happened when you have this line of mallets, and I hear your story started on drum set, and that was a passion. At what point did it happen in college? Did you really embrace that melodic world of percussion?
That was an interesting thing, because I came in and I auditioned, and the only reason I got into the school was because I was a competent drum set player. There's a guy that actually not too far from this neighborhood. Do you know Rob Slack?
No.
He was teaching it like out of his studio. My cousin, the orchestral percussionist, took lessons with him. Fantastic performer. He plays with the Pacific Symphony, and he tried to teach me mallets, and we hung out like a couple years ago at my cousin's wedding, and I was like, hey Rob, it's Ian, do you remember? He was like, oh yeah, of course man, how's it going? I was like, man, I'm really sorry I was so crappy. He's like, God, you never practice. I would show up every day. I'm in high school trying to learn marimba. I've got this crappy little xylophone. I never practiced. He was like, I for sure wrote you off completely.
Whoa.
Like, because I just, I was just sort of half-assing the gig. I would like work on my snare drum stuff, but I was really just wanting to play drum set. And then in college, it was like, yo man, that's not going to happen here. You're going to learn your scales, you're going to play marimba, you're going to play vibes. And so it was just one of those things I decided, like, well, if I'm going to do this, let's go. So I was playing piano every day, playing marimba every day. Then the next thing you know, that kind of became a weird addiction and obsession to get better at that stuff, since I was so bad at it relative to that. And
so
then
do you think you brought a new perspective to that stuff by being a drum set player that actually made you stand out?
Well,
that's a weird question to ask somebody.
I think the coordination and linear understanding of how things lay out helps you with some stuff, but the lack of like tactile awareness of note accuracy, that just takes a long time to learn. And even piano, you have 10 fingers down, so there's always like a facility that you have, and the intervals don't change. Now you've got expanding intervals, you've got all these things that if you're not used to it, it's like, this isn't even, I don't even know what monster this is.
I think I can speak on it. It might be easier for me to speak on that, so he doesn't have to talk about himself. But
I asked the wrong guy that question.
Ian's groups are, I would say, extremely aware of vertical alignment, and most of the time when we use the phrase like quantize, it's in a negative context. And you're talking about maybe somebody's drum set feel, but in the sense of an ensemble where you're talking about 18 kids trying to play together, spread across 30 yards. It's definitely a challenge to get that level of vertical alignment and that quantization of front to back or even side to side. And Ian's groups are always on the top level of that. I would say,
thank you, sir,
in such a way that they stand out.
And that is 100% from my drum set playing.
That's cool.
And like that, a lot of that comes down to that one time Russ Miller opened up my eyes and showed me the universe, the space between the notes, the real space, not the notated space, to understand what's on the front edge and the back edge and what the true center of time is, and teaching even young kids that don't know what it means to be on the front or the back side of it, to teach them tendencies to learn how to sway and move naturally in the music and be organic about it. I think my entire background as a rhythm section player, and when I started playing a lot more keyboards, that helped me start to spot the trend of mallet players not being very good at that, because I'd be working with these guys that are great mallet players, terrible at fixing rhythms in the ensemble because they weren't really ever in charge of rhythms. They were always leaning on someone. And a drum set player having so much dependency on, or not having any dependency on anybody else, I mean, like, here's the pocket, you're going to go with me or you're going to go home.
Right.
Is that ownership, whereas everyone else is like, just play together, we have to communicate as an ensemble, all this stuff.
Yeah, as we all drag together.
Yeah.
You know, like,
it's interdependency. Yeah. It's not actual being, like, metronomically independent and really understanding what tempo is. So
totally. And even within, this is sort of an offshoot, but I spent a lot of time studying sort of just what you're leaning on as a drum set player. I mean, there are players that they lean on the physicality of their right hand, and that gives them a different feel. You know, like you have somebody like Stuart Copeland, who everything feels like it's sort of like pushing against how much his right hand is pushing. So it's interesting to think that as in big groups like that, there's that tension release that you have, and trying to even that out so that everybody's grooving together as opposed to one guy's pulling, the other one's...
Given the environment, it's definitely, if you want to create a feel with the ensemble, you tend to have to start with perfection to understand what
and
the
arrangement
mathematical, because the math is you can't dispute the math. Like whatever that rhythm is, it's a mathematical value. There's a certain truth to it. So understanding that truth and then creating that variation from the truth, where I think in you know, pop sense or jazz sense, that you can create your own feel and your own interpretation of time without ever experiencing that truth or studying that truth. Like there's a lot of players who just have that thing.
Because there's only one of them. They don't have like 4 other drum set players that have to match it exactly.
And then they got 3 guys. That
unless it's like James Brown's band, there might be that many.
Right. But so I think in this activity, it's a weird thing where you have to establish like a benchmark, which is a mathematical truth, and then you can mess with that once you achieve it.
And I'm acutely aware of that in producing and engineering too, because I see that, you know, in laying down a drum track and using Beat Detective, making it technically perfect, but arranging it such that, you know, like low notes on marimba are going to sound more behind the beat than the high notes do, just by virtue of the way the transient is and how wide a single hit is. So like when I can quantize a drum groove, but if I've used a fat snare drum sound, I can see that the mind is going to think that's laid back because the stick hits it, but the sound actually takes a while to happen.
Right.
So it feels behind the beat. Whereas that same groove, quantized exactly the same way with a really snappy snare drum, is going to feel less behind the beat. So a lot of that's so arrangement oriented.
Do you
can
think
aim for perfection and get something?
A lot of that is like you just kind of know what to do, like, right?
Yeah.
It's like, because I've tried to explain like the inner workings of like, well, how do you arrange this, or like something that technical. You can tell people all that stuff, but really, I think we all know the answer is like, well, yeah, you don't hear it. It sounds crappy. Fix it. No, that sounds good. That's for me is like when people ask me the super in-depth questions, is like, you might not have good enough ears to hear it, so I can give you some guidelines, but you gotta just feel it. You gotta know when it's right. And then
back off. Just reminded me of. Do you remember the Stuart Copeland quote? We talked about this 25 years ago.
I know exactly what you're gonna say.
Where he says, where somebody asks, how do you get that space between swing and straight? And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. I either play swing or I play straight. And then we're sitting there going, no, you don't. No, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But it's awesome.
Yep.
And I'll buy the record.
It's the it thing. It's like, you know, when you know, like schools of like Japanese drummers just try and study Steve Gadd, and like they want to know what they want to break it down, they want to do it. Or anyone that's like a highly intellectual drumming community tries to isolate this thing, like they might just be a little sloppy. You should not try and transcribe like Art Blakey verbatim. You have to get the feel right. You just got to know what the sound is.
Yeah.
And I think like,
and look at it from different angles. You know, like when you watch
Yeah.
Steve Gadd, or you hear Steve Gadd and you watch him, you're like, oh,
that's
well, part of it's because he's doing this while he's drumming.
It's like if you want to play the Steve Gaddisms, you can't be like, well, you know, when I transcribed it, I think it's a sextuplet. Like, dude, you see him doing it, or you watch him and he's only playing this high off the drum and the hi-hat, and you're like, well, that's why it sounds like that. It's not a studio trick. There's not mics. He's playing like a third of the volume that you're playing.
I think it might be a better angle to just study idioms rather than individuals. Like a New Orleans type feel,
right?
And then you can kind of put that together and go, oh, well, a lot of what Steve Gadd is very that, and maybe with a little bit of this, and then, like you said, like a Brazilian feel. Really.
Yeah, I think that kind of ties into even more so of all the things that we're talking about, and not just like imitating one artist or whatever, but like understanding like a whole genre so that you can grab all the flavors from that genre, not just like what that one person did in that genre. And that can be the same for like, as kids are coming up and they're trying to learn, all these kids want to be, I want to be a front ensemble arranger. It's like, okay, you can, if you spend all the time trying to figure out my tricks of how I orchestrate it, you'll have no idea why I did it because you're not actually listening to what the whole music is.
Yeah.
Like I created a Danny Elfman type moment here. You're now more worried about, well, what are the stickings in this? Not like, well, let's study like film score music that's in this genre. Then you actually have a flavor palette to pull from, and you can see the context of what a particular composer or arranger is doing. But I don't think enough kids are looking at like,
Understand? Yeah,
not even kids, maybe adults too. I mean, just people that are learning how to be composers and arrangers aren't getting a wider scope of what they're trying to emulate.
Yeah, understanding like why those decisions were made, not just the decision, or in a vacuum. I think that's, I mean, studying Steve Gadd is a perfect one, even though it's an old reference. It's like there's a reason why there's Steve Gadd, and then what's before him. You know, there emerged Steve Gadd because he was a unique individual who somehow was able to drum from his unique personality. So it's like in Stuart Copeland or all these different guys that have a real unique identity. To copy them is to turn down the volume on yourself, you know, and it might be like a useful exercise to just sort of like do it and go, oh, it feels like that to do it. Does that feel like me? Does it resonate with me and what I want to say?
Right. I think like what you were talking about before, analyzing what makes Stuart Copeland sound like Stuart Copeland, or
it's a good tool for your craft.
What's the guy's name from Blink 182?
Travis Barker.
Like I kind of put them in the same category where they're very right hand lead, like kind of just what you were saying about the weight of that right hand kind of running the show, rather than, because I mean you listen to Travis Barker, you couldn't put a Met on some of that stuff,
right?
But he's very
but it feels
accurate.
Good.
Yeah.
Then Stuart Copeland, same thing. It feels good.
But I think the House of Cards is, sorry to interrupt, but if you were to walk up to Stuart Copeland while he's playing something like that, like sending out and you just grabbed his right hand, I think everything else would fall apart. Whereas if you went to Vinny and he's playing something and you just grabbed his right hand, he would still be going.
Absolutely.
Because he's not like leaning on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
As like his stitch.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Russ Miller was explaining to me as like categorizing me, he's like, you're not the only person plays like this, but he's like, but you're a pattern drummer. Your tempo is based off the pattern you're playing, not the true understanding of like where the big beats are happening regardless of the pattern. So if one small part of your pattern shifts, you're allowing that to collapse the overall tempo, then you're expanding the accordion back out to make up for the motion. And he's like, there's a lot of pattern drummers out there. You learn all these patterns, but you don't truly understand time as a global like bouncing egg that's hitting every single spot every time. You're not listening to the sound of the drums. And he would always talk about this like imagining like it's a bouncing ball where there's constant inertia. I don't know if you ever saw the Steve Jordan like underground DVD that he did about time playing, and he talks about that, about seeing this as this bouncing ball, and then Russ would teach me how to hear the drum set ring and really hear boom, and like listen to the way the cymbals are ringing when you hear that kick drum. When you hit the snare drum, like listen to the toms ringing, and all of a sudden you would hear long note, long note, long note instead of boom. That's so nerve-wracking to hear tight. And so then he taught me how to hear that, and I was like, explosion brain. And that's when I realized, like, to play all the stuff that I used to be able to play, I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But it made me see it. It was like I saw the Matrix, and I immediately now understood why everything was wrecked. Yeah. But I took that knowledge, and now I give it to other people. But I just couldn't do it to myself to like go back for the next 4 years and reinvent everything I would need to do to like internalize that concept of tempo.
It's kind of cool though. It's almost like he birthed, or he like encouraged the educator in you. Well, I said educator. Emphasis. He encouraged the educator in you while somehow sort of discouraging the player.
And also keeping me from ever gigging again. And then ironically, I wrote a session. I wrote a bunch of marching band tunes, and we were at East West on Sunset, and he was on the session.
Whoa!
Yeah, it was crazy. He was playing marching snare on a session for my. He's like, "What do you say? Hey, what's up, Russ? How you doing, man?"
No, I'm your boss.
Yeah. It was a crazy. We had a good conversation about it, and I run into him at the NAMM show and stuff like that all the time, and I just always tell him like, "Man, that truth, that honesty." I never played again after that, but but now you're playing for me on this session, so that's cool. And but he's like, yeah, if you're in this chair and your name's on the page, you're obviously doing something right.
Yeah. How interesting is it that the way we think really manifests itself in interesting ways in how we play? Because I remember a similar thing. Like I went and took a lesson with Dave Weckel, and at this point, I think I was 19, and I was obsessed with time and drumming and playing to a click, and I have this, I would call it kind of an issue, but technically it's called synesthesia, where I hear rhythms and see shapes. So I was like writing shapes on my snare drum and like playing the shapes and freaking out, and like, and I got a chance to go hang out with Weckel, like one of my heroes. And there was always like Vinny and Weckel,
of course,
back then, right? And there's always something about Weckel's playing that I didn't like as much as Vinny's, and that felt less like it had, like you were saying, this thing, but it had more of a pattern-oriented thing. But obviously he's so great. And when I went there, I remember asking him, like, it was almost like I had like a chance to talk with Yoda in a way.
Yeah.
And I was like, so, do you see music as being, quarter note to quarter note, and like, and then you arrange the grid evenly between those? Or are you thinking like every note? Like when you see a sextuplet, do you see like 6 groups that repeat, or you see like? And he's like, oh, the only way I can think is just every single note. And I was like, interesting. You sound like that's how you think.
Yeah. Well, and then I remember watching the Dave Weckel Back to Basics video with that sweet, like, that dark red recording custom kit. And he's like, and he's got the sweet hair, his drumming shoes,
the Vic Firth
and the sticks. But I remember he said there's the one sequence where he starts the sequencer. And he's like, you want to play this, you want to make sure every single note is exactly with the grid. I don't know if it's a sequencer or a met that's just set to 16th note subdivision. Yeah. And I remember like, like every note has to be in time? Like as a kid, like, and then of course you fast forward 10 years later and the same thing, like every note? Like, damn it, Dave Weckel told me I was going back to basics and I forgot. Damn you. I got distracted by the hair and the stigma.
Yeah.
Because you grow up around a lot of drummers like, you don't want to play like Dave Weckel. I was like, yeah, God forbid you play in time with a great sound and a great touch and good... Shit, I should have played more like Dave Weckel.
That is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's true. You can kind of reverse engineer people's thinking by what you hear. And a lot of those great groove drummers, there's a certain... this sounds like a negative word, but a certain maybe ignorance to things that actually allows them to not focus too much on the trees and see the forest.
Yep.
And like you just get, wow, what's so powerful about that groove? And then it's time for them to take a solo and you're like,
yeah.
And it's like those people that have both though.
Yep.
It's a transcendent sort of understanding. They get the zoom in and the zoom out.
Yeah, it's the way that what we hear as as the notes, the attack of whatever the instrumentation is, but it's the way those attacks communicate with each other, which gives us that sense of it's almost symmetry, even though sometimes it's not symmetrical.
Right.
But it gives us that sense of comfort.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like John Bonham right now, where if you were to quantize like his kick drum every time he boom, boom, every
Right.
double beat on the kick drum, it's not even close if you were to analyze that. But the way
It's consistent though.
the way those notes that communicate with what was played previous and what is about to be played, everything just falls right where you want it.
Oh yeah.
And there's a comfort, and I think that those type of drummers instinctually know where that is.
I was writing about this morning for a drumming chapter in the book, but isn't it weird that especially drumming, all music exists in your memory. So like, and drumming is like the most focused in version of that. It's like,
Yeah.
that feels like something just because of your memory of the first snap, and then each successive beat you hear relates to a memory of the one before, and you're not like making time, you're just representing it. It's such a strange thing that
Well,
we deal with.
Into the feel thing, and kind of similar to that as well, like I think some skills that drum set players aren't growing up with now, especially like with the prevalence of like gospel chops, where it's like just basically play really loud 16th note patterns and mix them up in any like
With a lot of attitude.
It's like, so we're gonna wrap this up here, just play any dynamics, or just like no, just as many different variations on tempo to lose the band. But like, because they're just beating the hell out of the instrument, they're playing to a grid, they're playing perfect, because they all want to be hip hop drummers playing that stuff. It's just so many videos come out. These guys are phenomenal technicians, but like, it doesn't feel good. It's just like on the front of the beat, it's just kind of like so aggressive. And then you watch like marching guys, like rudimental players, they don't really have any like swagger as much because they don't slur stuff out like they used to back in like the old days when things would be a little bit more like even traditional American rudimental drumming that has so much freedom and intern. And I remember, yeah, exactly. But like the first time I heard, when I heard Brazilian swing, I was like, what is that? Ba, da, 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 da. What is that? What's that
Which one is
rhythm?
it? Show me on paper.
Wait, yeah, which note do I move to the side? And then it was like, no, dude, you just gotta feel. It's like, no, you gotta. I don't even. How do hands do that?
Yeah.
And that was the doorway for me of understanding feel and learning the West African stuff that wasn't like exactly metric. There has to be a swagger to it. And being around those guys that like, that's just a direct result of them playing the drum weird and strange. It wasn't like, we're gonna take regular 16th notes and we're gonna play them Brazilian style. It's like a tradition that just came out of like, well, we just kind of play with our left hands. So it turned into like
It's funny that it's a little bit of a tangent, but how important sticking is to feel.
Oh my God!
It's just not the notes you
Ergonomics
play.
and gravity.
Yeah, it's so important. Sticking is underrated.
Yeah.
But
well, and that
especially
studying
like in our world,
Yeah.
I think it's very.
But bringing that experience of world
underutilized.
percussion of
Yeah.
non-perfectly quantized rhythms made me more aware of like finding the little nuggets in the space between the rhythms and thinking about things that we don't necessarily. I rarely get to apply any of that stuff because it's very difficult to replicate that with kids. But as a rhythmic musician, having that awareness of when something has the right amount of swagger. When if a guy's playing jazz but his ride cymbal skip beat is in a weird spot, you're like, yeah, I don't buy that.
Right.
That's not legit. Not for this style. It's not da ga da. In this one, ding da ding ding da dam. Just for this particular era of music.
Exactly.
And when you know those things, you can at least write more idiomatically, even if it's for marching percussion. You know the isms of a style or the isms of a feel interp that can kind of be metrically written to be more legit.
Yeah.
But you're doing it out of a conscious effort, not like, well, we're playing swing, so this is what we do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and that's you honed in on one of the more mysterious little things about swing and jazz, which is that. It's like
that skip note is the one, man.
when it's a more like a 16th than a triplet or not?
Yeah.
And why?
And then if it's more like a triplet, can you play 16th note fills? But if it's more like a 16th note, can you still play triplet? How do you? And you gotta study.
You just play no fills.
Exactly. You gotta study what all the good guys did
Yeah.
and master their vocabulary to the point where you know that you're speaking the right language.
Right. Yeah, that's the strange thing about idioms is they sort of enslave you.
They're self-defining. It's like all the good stuff's already been done. Just try not to suck. Like with those styles that you're not comfortable with. Like what this is a Chicago shuffle. So Purdy shuffle. Can I just play that for everything? You know, or everyone has like in the book. Like the one that's terrible, and it's like on the book. That's what it looks like you're supposed to play. Wait, so 4 on the floor. And like every student, they're like both hands playing together.
Yeah.
Then you watch someone play that shuffle. You're like, could you have notated it any worse, or like made it any more wrong about like the difference between the heights and how you play a fill? And you watch those guys play it. Did you ever have any of those old Robin Ford albums?
Yeah.
With like Tom Breckline playing drums.
Yeah, the one with Talk to Your Daughter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the best drum sounds and best shuffle players in the history of life. Oh my God!
And you look at him, and he's one of the guys who rushes the most with no qualms ever, too. But
Dude,
he's great.
it feels so good, that shuffle style. I remember getting turned on to that really young, but when you don't see what they're doing, it's almost impossible to know what they're actually physically doing behind the kit to get that
make
feel.
it happen. There's a local guy named Frank Conteno, I think Coto, rooted down in Laguna Beach, and he has one of the most amazing feels, and I think we call it Zildjian. I don't know how many people call it Zildjian, but that
that's
in between.
What's the guy that Jack White's drummer?
Meg?
I said drummer.
Oh, ouch.
Oh, I love you, Meg.
Edit. Okay.
Don't know it.
In one of his new bands, not her.
What's the
Raconteurs?
the Rough Pack?
Oh, okay.
What's his name?
Oh yeah. I don't know his name, but
That big washy kind of like
Yeah.
Ringo question mark
I sent you that
swing.
link. The name of the song is Apartment 33.
Oh yeah.
It was in Paris gig.
Yeah.
Google it.
Google it. Apartment 33, Paris gig. Yeah,
Well, and I think
amazing.
that's a part of this community, like in the marching thing, that yes, you listen to it outside, but a lot of people don't equate. Like, well, you couldn't do that in here. You couldn't play something with feel here. It's like you could.
Good.
There's a way to do that, but if you don't have access to really understanding how to do it yourself, very hard to teach that.
Yeah.
You know, like, so for me, I feel way more comfortable teaching that stuff to our drums.
Daru Jones, I think is his name.
Okay.
Daru Jones? Yeah, Daru Jones. Look that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's easier to choose one guy and make him.
Yeah, like, so you could do
drummer.
that feel, but it's like you wouldn't want like the pit players dun dun ding dun dun. It's like stop, don't do that.
Yeah.
But you could create a moment like that with your drum set player if you have that. But you can't send the kid a video and go figure it out. You have to like have that knowledge. Like I can teach a kid how to play like a Brazilian samba groove on the kit that's more authentic, but it's probably not going to get it for the first year. Like to really understand the style, you have to play in like a bateria. You got to do the thing. You have to know the calls, just to understand how to do even just the ride rhythm the right way and have it feel like carnival. You know, there's that swagger. And seeing scantily clad women. I mean, that's what we used to do Brazilian gigs all the time. There used to be this place before it burned down in Redondo Beach called Samba, and we would do like a dinner party, and it would be me, and like I would play caixa, like the snare drum, and then there would be someone else playing surdo, and there'd be 2 dancing girls, and I would just do the whistles and the calls, and everyone sing "Leo, Leo, 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 Brazil, Brazil," and you just play this gig and hype everyone up at this churrascaria. And that's like, you learn more about like how to swing by doing that, just by watching the girls dance and the experience of what that's like, than like if you go like, okay, I've got my Brazilian book of rhythms. All right, I've got a recording of it. I'm listening to it. Yep, I think I got it. I think I understand the swing. I practiced on my pad. We're good. You know, you got to go do it.
And so at Pulse, you bring the girls in.
Yeah, exactly. That goes well. Yeah.
There's like nobody at Broken City auditions.
Yeah, exactly. A tribute to Rio, ladies.
That's awesome.
Sorry, guys, brought the pain. Brought all my Brazilian dancing girls down.
That's amazing. I wonder why those. Well, I guess it makes a lot of sense that those cultures versus their older cultures. So there is more of like a looseness and like a, I don't know, a more organic quality to those rhythms. And I guess
it's also
what we have is jazz, I guess, as Americans.
It's so intellectualized, though. There's so much of like the Brazilian stuff. When you go out there and study, you can go in an area like where the samba school like rehearses, and you watch the kids bring in like sticks from the forest and stuff because they don't have drumsticks. They're like carving them up themselves, and you see the little kid, and the little kids know all the grooves, everything. They're 8 years old. They've been watching their dad or their older brother doing that since they were kids. And you just be like in the middle. When we were in Salvador, this area called the Pelourinho, where we were studying, they would just have the dudes, and it would just start going through the city, and you poke your head out. What's going on? You go into a cafe at night, and the guys are playing a more tamed down version of it with all just handheld instruments, and like playing cavaquinho and pandeiro, and there's all this hip stuff going on, but it's like, it's not written down. None of it's written down. It's all oral tradition, just like African music, but in America, with the writing down of music and the intellectualization of it, I think it sterilizes it because it makes it so everyone can access it and study it, but then you're not experiencing it like how the guys who started
losing the essence and the life. And it's funny, I took a lesson with around the same time I took that lesson with Dave Weckel when I was maybe 20, and I was a little older, maybe 21 or 22. I took a lesson with Joey Heredia.
Oh yeah.
And I remember one of the areas that he really schooled me on was he was showing me some stuff around clave, and he showed me some really intense I guess salsa music, and he was like, tell me if it's 3/2 or 2/3.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't know how he did it, because there was like 50% chance of getting it wrong, but I was always wrong. I almost thought he was tricking me and just like telling me I was wrong, but he's like, my brother doesn't play drums, and he always knows which one it is.
You know what the secret is?
What is it?
The downbeat of the montuno is always on the 2 side of the clave.
Okay.
Always the downbeat is the 2 side of the clave. If the B side, it starts with an upbeat, whatever it is. If the beat starts on an upbeat, that's the 3 side.
And if
it starts on a downbeat,
you turn it on,
2.
do you know where the beat is, no matter what?
Well, you gotta know. Like, you can also check.
You gotta know where it started.
Like
right?
If you can hear the bongo bell,
Yeah.
because the bongo bell only has one variation. The isolated one upbeat, that's also the 2 side.
Okay.
And you know, if you hear even the cascada pattern, it starts on the downbeat. You get the 1/2. That's where you know beat 2 is, or the 2 side of the clave. Michael Spiro taught me that one.
That's
it
cool.
Almost invariably never fails until you get into like the deep rumba, like Wawanko stuff, like Los Muñequitos de Matanzas, all like the hardcore Cuban stuff. That's like all the traditional folk recordings. That's like, it's so deep, and they're kind of like in 6/8, kind of like in 4/4, super milky.
That sounds like what he showed me, because whatever he showed me was just like, I'm going to show you something that's impossible to decode.
Oh yeah, then he gave you like the secrets of the Amazon.
It totally was. I was like, I hear it, but I don't know which one, where it starts.
Yeah,
like I can lock into it. But.
Well, because they have this stuff. A lot of that stuff will sound like.
Yeah, it's all kind of like rubber banded out.
So it's like, it's 3/2 clave, but it's tripletized basically.
Yeah.
So, but then you hear pop 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 pop. What? 2, 3. If you don't know where the rest of the patterns fit, your brain can hear it like you're not only on the wrong side of the clave, you're like inside of a triplet of the wrong beat, and you're like, what? And all the ladies are dancing. You're like, how the hell do they know where the tempo is? I'm like, I'm a learned musician. I should know where the downbeat is. You watch a little 6-year-old. She's doing the moves. She knows exactly where it is.
Like going to McDonald's.
Yeah. The humility of studying other cultures where like the rhythmic complexity is so dense. And we're like, okay, guys, let's work on a triplet 1 here. We're so like behind as far as like a culture. Yeah. Culturally, we're rhythmically behind in like our general sentiment, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Lull.
Lull. We experienced a lull.
Is that the hour lull?
Is that possible? It might be. Let's check.
I think we're there.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It's perfect.
It says an hour and 4 minutes, and I probably started that 4 minutes early.
Well, there it is.
A natural end to a beautiful podcast.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
Very
what's
cool.
up? Let me ask a question.
Mm.
Have you started working on this season of Pulse yet?
Fuck no.
You're gonna edit that out.
Yeah.
G-rated podcast.
Oh, are we still going?
Oh yeah, we're rolling, man.
Oh,
That's
all right.
awesome.
It's out there.
All right, sweet.
Dude, I'll be able to add the first beat to our podcast. I
Yeah.
don't need one. So, and kind of not, but sort of. We've started.
Well, I think that John tends to create, like, we talked about what we want to do this year already.
Yeah.
So that has kind of already been decided.
Cool concept.
And then he'll go and kind of like create a more cohesive visual or like concept identity before he brings it to me. Because I'm like the first guy, like, oh, but then how do we get there and how do we do this? I start immediately poking holes. He's just like, shut the hell up. Let me tell you the concept. And like, then I'll play you the music. But we already had an inspiration for it last year, kind of mid-season. And we were like, this could be the next year's show, maybe.
Oh, awesome.
So when he gave me the thumbs up, I was like, all right, we're going to do it. So
that's cool. So it starts
there is-
conceptual. Usually.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Always starts conceptually, at least as far as...
Does it ever start with a piece of content and that leads to conceptual? Or is
Yeah, it
kind
might
of
be like
something-
mixed media. It might be...
Yeah.
Maybe it's a choreography thing. Maybe it's some sort of like more like mental idea. But I think lately we've just been trying to find something that our visual creative folks can immediately embrace and create a story and a picture to score music to.
That's great.
You know, versus trying to like...
You all need a North
Sometimes...
Star
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah. You know, sometimes I tried to like bring the movie score to life first before having a clear vision of what like the director was going to put on the screen.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to be a little bit more specific about what visually is going to occur, so the marriage of like audio visual is a little bit closer from the get-go versus like kind of reverse engineering, like, well, let's see what happens in the drill and then we might tweak some stuff.
That's cool. It's so interesting how I'm sure every year is an evolution like that.
Oh
Like,
god, yeah.
because when we met the other day, it was a similar thing. Just kind of what's not broken that we don't, we don't want
Right.
to like ruin something that worked last year or
Right.
the year before.
Or overthink some of the
Yeah.
That's-
value of spontaneity.
That's what happens to us sometimes, is like overthinking how to correct on a process that was already good. Be like, no, but we can do better. Let's better the crap out of this. And then rarely does that ever happen.
Yeah, just like Western culture does with those rhythms. you
Right,
know, like,
exactly.
it's the same thing. Like we, especially now that, it's a slightly more officialized, I would say, my involvement with Broken City, we don't want to ruin how it worked last year, which I thought was really nice. Those different paradigms of
Right.
bringing, somebody who was in the activity a zillion years ago, me, but comes from a singer-songwriter point of view, and then you guys, which are in it. Like, I don't want to jump in and be like, hey guys, I want to do it with you, and blow it and ruin it,
Yeah.
It's cool to do it that way. Keep it not working and working at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I think there's like a comfort level that John and I have with each other after doing it for so long. He knows what I need to have enough information to go forward, and he
Yeah.
also knows what information not to give me so that I don't get caught up on crap that doesn't totally affect the music. Like, I don't need to worry about the functionality of the costume change, or like, he's like, you need to just get the music in this form and then we can start playing with it from there. He's good about like masterminding the process of how we get from event to event, even just in the design process, not necessarily the event in the show. Like,
Right.
we know the priority is like, we have this mashup we have to finish the show with, so we need to like actually work on that first to make sure we know where the destination is going to be, if it's going to be worth it or not.
Nice.
It's almost like sometimes we have to take a journey into another part of the show to see if it's like, is this going to pay off? Can we come up with something? Oh yeah, this is actually really badass. We can eventually develop this into something later, not right now. Mark that, tag it, save it. Now let's go back to the opener and
Yeah, so
figure
I
you
out
just
work
thought-
random access if you have to.
I just thought
Yeah.
of like
Non-linearly.
Exactly.
I just thought of like more than a dozen questions I wanted to ask you. So
Bring
Sure.
it.
can we do this again?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
Podcast part 2.
You bet, man.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it's
Like,
fun.
We'll dive into more of the process and what you're willing to share, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Like,
Well, thanks for
like
coming.
10 minutes away. It's easy, yeah.
Dude, that's great.
Thanks for having me,
We'll do a
guys.
whole series.
Much appreciated.
Guys, thank you so much for listening, watching, whatever it is you're doing. It's Mike. This is Ian. I'm Adam. See you guys soon.
ringing sound, poison rain, don't come around here again. I will cover you, you will feel no pain. Wait for the blue sky again. I did it for the money, babe, did it for the green. Then my luck ran out, lost my sanity. Now I'm here today, wanna testify. Don't do it for the money, babe, 'cause the money's gonna lie.